Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another of my amazing interviews. Now, I don't know if you're one of those people who are perhaps in London or one of the major cities and you're worried about the traffic and the ULEZ scheme, the system that is there to penalise you if you travel about. You may be following all sorts of YouTubers who've been talking about it, such as Brown Car Guy, for example, who recently went out to do some investigation to see if what the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says the excuse for having this ULEZ system is to reduce the air quality. Well, Shahzah, the Brown Car Guy, went out with one of those air quality meters to actually test whether that was true. And I'm very pleased to say that Shahzah joins me now. Hello, Shahzah.
Hello, Richard. How you doing? How's everything?
I'm doing very well. It's lovely to have you on the show. I've been watching your videos along with many of the others who are talking about the ULEZ, and I've sort of not spoken too much about that because you guys know what you're talking about, really. And I thought, well,
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But you're very kind, Richard. Thank you so much.
And I'm actually down on the south coast, so it's although it is a concern if I drive into London, of course, because it will. And the expansion is the thing that's sort of really worrying people like me who are not in London. But of course, this is affecting all those people not in London, but all the way around who come in and commute, and eventually all of us. So,
well, yeah, eventually, I think you hit the nail on the head there with eventually all of us. And I think this is where people are a little bit blinkered at the moment, where they think this is just a London problem, and it's just blatantly not a London problem. I think that people such as Keir Starmer have already said, the leader of the Labour Party have already said that their intention is to bring this out everywhere. That's the plan.
yeah.
And it's always been the case that what starts in London eventually feeds into other parts of the country.
Yes, no, absolutely. And we can see that people are getting nervous in certain towns. Colchester, I think, recently has begun to realise that they're having the 15-minute city and the excuse is the traffic. And no doubt the air quality will be one of those things they bring up as another excuse to bring in this tyranny. I know we've seen Thetford is another place, and Oxford, of course, are having these problems. But London is this big focus for the ULEZ. So before we get on to that and the sort of main reason about this, just for those people who don't know you, let's give your channel a good old plug. What sort of things, what got you going on the channel, and how did you get alerted to this ULEZ problem?
Well, Richard, I've been an automotive journalist and content creator, particularly a journalist for about 34 years now across the UK and the Middle East. I've done all kinds of things, mostly related to automotive. So I do car reviews, I cover the car industry, and at the moment I freelance for several outlets as well. So this is what I do. So the channel is not the only thing I do. The channel is obviously my own, and that's my brand. But in addition to that, I'm a freelance motoring journalist. Now, the ULEZ thing, this is when it first was mooted last year. And last year in March, I had bought myself a classic BMW. You would say a modern classic, really. And the reason I bought that was because it's a car I used to own and I really missed, and I thought it would be good to tell that story or to continue that story. And secondly, because a lot of people said to me that if you're creating this brand and this channel and this brand identity, you need a hero car as such, And I thought that would be a good car to tell that story with. As we know, by that time, ULEZ had been expanded to inner London, which was North and South Circular roads. And I live just on the other side of the North Circular Road. So I thought, okay, well, I'm fine. As long as I don't, and I can use the North Circular, as long as I don't turn into London,
Yes.
I'm absolutely fine. And I never actually drive into London. And just for people watching, I'm sure you have a huge audience around the world. And there's a kind of misunderstanding about London, and what London actually is. Because a lot of people say, oh, you don't need a car in London. I'm like, yes, that's correct. But that's central London. And I know because I was born in central London. I grew up in central London. And this is why, personally, I actually have no issue with congestion charging and ULEZ in central London. Because I know that it's actually a pain in the backside, honestly, to have to own and run a car in central London. And you don't really need it. But outer London is a completely different scenario. So outside of the North and South Circulars, I mean, we are very sparse. It's not as dense as it is in London. the interconnectivity of the public transport system is not as good. And so because of all of these factors, it's a very different kettle of fish. Yes, you can get by without a car. You can. I mean, I spend long periods without a car, but ultimately, so for example, where I live in northwest London, Brent Cross Shopping Centre, which is well known by a lot of people, but also famous for having been in one of the Pierce Brosnan Bond movies.
Yes.
It's the one where he was driving the 7 Series and launched it off the car park, was actually filmed at Brent Cross car park. That by car is about 15 minutes away tops, But if I go by bus, I have to change 2 buses, and
Right.
then suddenly that's up to an hour's journey for no reason, So the convenience and the usefulness of having a car in outer London is different.
Yeah.
But aside from that, obviously I bought this Classic. The Classic's clearly not ULEZ compliant. It never will be. And all of a sudden this thing was announced and I was like, oh, great. I mean, now that I've decided to tell this story again, because the first time I owned this car, I sold it too early and I regretted it. And now it looks like it might happen all over again. That's where it started for me, you know. But then when I started to look around, so straight away, there's a neighbor of mine with a young family, they saved up to buy a perfect family car, which is a Honda CR-V, and it's ideal for them. They don't use it every day. It's maybe for school runs or for shopping trips or for weekends out and stuff like that. But it's a diesel. So suddenly, he's in a situation where we've saved up to buy the perfect car for us, and now what do we do with it, And then when I started to become aware of that, I thought it incumbent upon me as an automotive journalist and a motoring, as a car guy, the brown car guy, but also as a car guy, I'm always going to be, I've tried to be as objective as I can as a journalist, but it's inevitable that I'm always going to be pro-motorist and pro-car because that's what I'm about. So at that point, I was like, okay, I need to look into this a little bit more and see how this actually impacts people. And at that point, there was a protest going on in Trafalgar Square. I went down there, spoke to a lot of people. And when you started to really, understand people's circumstances and how it was going to affect them, and then the heart-wrenching stories that started coming out from there. And then it kind of became almost like my duty to really tell these stories and to investigate how this was going to affect people and whether or not this was justified. And when I looked into it myself, I was like, this thing is not justified. This is way back when they came out with it, first of all, and they had the Jacobs report that was commissioned by TfL. And if you go through that report, you realize that, very quickly, you don't even have to go deep into the report, but very quickly you realize that there's very little benefits. It's almost negligible benefit, but also socioeconomically negative in some areas. It actually says that in the report, which is mind-blowing, actually. And then when you think about the amount of effort, energy, investment that's going to go into something like that, and the hardship it's going to cause versus the very minimal benefit that it might bring, I think this doesn't make any sense,
Now, I spoke to my son about 3 months ago, I think, and he's very skeptical about what I'm doing on the channel and all of that. And one of the things I was trying to sort of explain to him, well, what about this ULEZ scheme? Do you think that's a fair system? And he immediately checked out his cars. Now, he's based in Southampton, so he very rarely goes into London. And I thought, okay, that's quite an interesting thing, because if you're not in London, how aware are you? Would you be worried about it? Because in the past, when I've gone into London, it was just that, as you said, the congestion charge. And if it was a way to reduce congestion, then and it wasn't too expensive, then I could see some merit in it. So my son checked his car. They've got 2 cars between him and his partner, and both cars, according to the website, was compliant. And so he said, so his immediate thing was, well, our car's all right. Most people will be all right. Our cars are about 3 to 5 years old and all of this. And so he was very dismissive. And I said, but what if people have cars that aren't compliant? He said, well, they just have to change their cars, won't they? And I just thought, that you have no notion. And what if you live in the area and every time you use your car, you've got to pay this damn charge? So I took him as an example of potentially quite a lot of people who perhaps are just not aware of the impact. And you've hinted at that ordinary people who are being caught in this, and then you've got the sense that actually perhaps what the reason given is not really about congestion or even air quality, that there is more nefarious reasons behind this.
Well, there's clearly a budgetary hole to fill. I mean, that I think is becoming abundantly clear to anybody that looks into it. But aside from that, just to pick up on the scenario that you just described, of course, that's true of a lot of people. But it's endemic of like a myopic view that a lot of people have. It's like, oh well, it doesn't affect me, so I'm okay. So
Yes.
that's it. And I think that where the difference is with somebody like me, because as an automotive journalist, I review all kinds of cars. I love cars. I love old cars. But not all cars appeal to me. Not all cars would be right for me. If I review every single car from the basis of do I like it or does it work for me, then I'm not doing my job properly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, it's always been a case of right, I need to put myself into the shoes of the potential person that would own such a car, and I've got to look at it from their point of view. So this ability that is almost sort of trained into me is to kind of perceive how it might affect different people in different circumstances. So when I apply that same philosophy to ULEZ and to start to think about, it's very easy to say just buy another car. But when you think about the fact that, okay, there's inner London, central London, where there's a bit more affluence, and then you come out to outer London, where honestly there's less affluence, let's be absolutely honest, and some areas are quite deprived. And you think for a lot of people that they have scrimped and saved and really worked hard to get the car, which then maybe enables them to do the job that actually helps them to pay for that car. And all of a sudden you think it's very easy for them to swap into a newer car in a cost of living crisis, and also during a time in which new cars and to an extent used cars aren't actually available. This is the other thing that people seem to forget. They think that this is a normal situation. It isn't. What people haven't realized is that coming off the tail end of the pandemic, there was a huge car shortage, because manufacturers just weren't able to build these cars. And even now, to be honest, that's still lingering now. I mean, the delivery times have now started to come down to somewhere near normal, but some manufacturers are still quoting, 12 to 18 months delivery times, on their cars. And it depends on the complexity of the cars. What people don't realize is that because there was a computer chip shortage, a semiconductor shortage, and on average, a car has about 3,000 of these, a modern car has about 3,000 of these things built into the car, so you can't build them. The case in point, at some point last year, I had a fault with the odometer on my classic car, on my 1989 BMW E30. So there's a specialist company that fixes the odometers. So I took it to my usual place. They took the dashboard, the instrument panel out, and they sent it off to get it repaired. And it took like 2 months. You're like, why did it take so long to get that back? It was a simple thing: take the back out, replace it, put it back in again. Turned out they were waiting for a semiconductor. They were waiting for a chip. Even in a 1980s car, turns out it needs a computer chip in the back of the instrument panel.
Good heavens.
And because there was such a shortage, I didn't have my car for 2 months because there was no odometer in it.
Yeah.
So there are many, many things. There are many, many little things that influence the situation, which is so easy to be dismissive about and not understand how this actually impacts people.
Yes.
To be able to say that it doesn't affect you is also, I think, very, like I said, blinkered, because ultimately there's a knock-on effect on everything. So a lot of people in London are now realizing that even if their car is compliant, even if they're okay, but the tradesmen that come in, the delivery drivers that come in, the handyman that come in, and literally the cost of deliveries and stuff like that are all going to be passed on to them. So ultimately their bills will go up. It will have an impact on them. And I think that, this is kind of crucial at the moment, that people need to understand, A, that there are much wider implications to this than they think. And even if it doesn't affect them, they still need to think about it. And B, what's coming on the tail end of this. And I don't know if you want to get into that, but as we know, that's a further sequence of draconian measures such as pay per mile and stuff like that.
Yes, that's and I think we'll get into that on another. We'll get you back on another occasion to go on a deeper dive on that.
It's a whole other kettle of fish.
Absolutely. But it's interesting what you say about the tradesmen and the people and the cost that will go up for people, because it's not just that individual. Yeah. It is a much wider issue.
Particularly with tradesmen, if I can just interject just for a second.
Yeah, of course.
What people don't realize is that a lot of these guys, they drive vans.
Yes.
And invariably, they drive diesel vans. So they're the first people to be affected by this, because ULEZ, obviously, if people aren't aware, most petrol cars from 2005 onwards are okay. Some, actually, as far back as the late 90s are actually okay. But in the case of diesel, it's strictly a 2015 cutoff point. That's when we switched to Euro 6 diesel. So even some 2015 diesel cars are not actually ULEZ compliant until you get to that changeover point later in 2015 when they did. So for a lot of van drivers, they invested a lot of money in their vans. Some of them have their vans kitted out and customized and especially made for their businesses. And suddenly they're like, well, what do I do with this now?
Yes.
And the cost to change to a van, because there's a massive van shortage. If cars are bad, vans are 10 times worse. There's a very limited supply of commercial vans, and they have a big problem. So for them to change, it's not a case of, oh, we'll give them 2 grand and they can swap up to a new van. We're looking at 20,000 quid in some cases for them to change up to a new van, or not even a new one, but a used one,
Bloody
if
hell.
they can
Yeah.
find one.
I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, and I drive a diesel van. I have a diesel van. I bought it 3 years ago, second hand. It's very low mileage, so I don't intend to change it. It'll last me probably another 10 years if I look after it, assuming that I'm allowed to drive the bloody thing. That's the thing. And £20,000 to change it would be just stupid. And then, of course, you've got the whole business with EVs that people are thinking, well, if I'm forced to change a car, have I got to go to this huge expense of an EV, which at the moment, another story for another time about how they're not necessarily as safe as everybody thinks, or
I mean, we can touch on it quickly. I mean, it's a little bit there's some myths going around EVs. I mean, to be honest with I'm an EV fan. I like them.
Okay.
And I think that, for the right person in the right circumstances, they're actually the perfect car. So they make a lot of sense, and they're getting better and better and better. And the technology is racing ahead in leaps and bounds. And there is this notion of they all catch fire. In fact, if you look at the stats, it's a fraction of what petrol cars catch fire.
Oh, right.
But the problem is that when they do catch fire, it's spectacular. So that's why this has taken up all the headline space. Because what happens with electric cars is that A, the fires are spectacular, and B, they're impossible to put out. That's the problem. So the propensity to catch fire is actually a fraction of the normal cars, or petrol and diesel cars, but it's just that they burn faster, longer, and they're much harder to put out. And of course, if you have seen recently, there was a ruling that came out that even repair shops have to keep these things 15 meters away from everything else, which suddenly is going to add a massive expense to the insurance and repair industry, because it's going to be very, very prohibitive for them to be able to do that.
Well, who's got 15 meters in your workshop to store, I mean, your whole workshop might be 15 meters.
I mean, Richard, if you've ever been down to one of these places, the cars are stacked bumper to bumper, door handle to door handle usually. They have no space.
No space at all, no. Absolutely. It is
crazy.
No,
it's absolutely crazy. I mean, the EV is a reliable, is a potentially good solution for a lot of people. And in an urban environment especially, it does make a lot of sense. If you're able to charge at home, it's perfect. But having said that, it's not the whole answer for a lot of people. It just doesn't work, and there's just not enough charges. You can't get enough distance out of it. So and basically, it's too expensive for a lot of people right now. That's, I think, the key stumbling block is that it's too expensive right now. So to ask all these people to switch up to an EV is that's just not viable.
Yes, if it was a slow implementation over 30, 50 years or whatever, it would be so much easier than a forced one, like
exactly
at the end of this decade. So let's go to the air pollution issue then, because that was the thing that I thought would be fascinating, because this does seem to be let's call it what it is. It does seem to be a lie. That one of the reasons is that we want to get people onto the ULEZ because the air pollution is so awful in London. And so you thought, well, okay, let's take that at face value and we'll go and test it out. Is that true? And I want to play in just a little snippet of you doing that from your video, and I'll link to the video so the audience can go and check it out if they've not already seen it. And of course, check your channel and follow you, of course, and keep up to date. So now I have to do a few little things here to make this work. So just bear with me. We'll just switch over to here and here. Not all that. I want this bit. Where has it gone? It's gone. No, it's here. It is here. I have it. There we go.
There you go.
There we go. I can't. There we are. Right. So if I just play this little snippet in.
This is Baker Street, where Sherlock Holmes lived. So the use of evidence is elementary, my dear Watson, and that's what we're doing today.
You might not hear the sound, but it's
Street,
actually
of course, if you're on Baker Street, that means you're on this very, very busy road here that goes up to Euston, King's Cross, all the west. It comes down from the Western Avenue. We can see there's a bunch of cars parked. And one thing I think I've realized about this device is that you have to leave it on for a few minutes for it to get an accurate reading. So this has been on for now a couple of minutes since I walked out of the station, so to allow it to get accurate reading. So I'm standing here now, just at the intersection where the traffic is now stopped. What's the reading I've got? AQI. Let's have a look. That's on 10. So that's good. So again, compare this to when I was just downstairs. So again, let me just point it at the traffic if you like, and we lower it down because people say like the emissions are lower down. So that's 10. Then we go on to particulates. We're looking at 2.5, 3.9. That's come well down from where it was. You can see some diesel taxis are moving off now, right? That one, I think I'm going to stop worrying about that one because those numbers stay pretty low. And
Okay, so there you are with your device. Let me just go and find you again. How do we do that? Oh dear, this bloody system is all over the place. bear with me as I just find, because Zoom is a weird thing. Oh, here we go. Here we are. I've got you back. Right. So hello. Thank you. So there you are with this little device. Could you just tell us what it was, what the device? Because you explained this in the video, of course. And, But it is an official, proper thing, even though it looks like a little mobile phone or an old-fashioned mobile phone.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, first of all, I've got to say that I can't claim credit for coming up with the idea because, I had done videos before where I've talked about, because what people don't realize is that there's official air quality monitoring stations around London. They're all over London.
Right.
They're dotted around London. And in fact, that live data is actually available to everybody. A lot of people still don't seem to understand that. You can literally go onto a website, you can Google it, and you'll find it. And it's live data coming straight out of those stations. And I've done this before, but I don't think it had the visual impact of really putting the point across to people. And then, to be fair, I saw a lot of the campaigners, the anti-ULEZ expansion campaigners, had bought these devices and were doing little reels and little things like that.
Yes.
And I thought, well, this is interesting. This might be a good visual way of really showing what's going on.
Absolutely.
And then, and again, full exposure. I didn't actually purchase this device. I contacted the company. So the company that produces them and sells them is Elitech. And I told them, I said, look, I'm thinking of doing this, So again, they then chose the device that they sent me. And the device that they sent me was a Temtop LKC, let me get this right, LKC 1000S plus second. It's a very long, convoluted name, but that's how it is in the world of these things, right? And so they sent me this device and they said, right, this is probably the best device for you to use for this purpose. And they sent me a brand new device. A lot of people are like, is it calibrated? Is it this? Is it? Well, they sent it to me, it was brand new, it was out of the box, and they knew what I was going to use it for.
Yeah.
So I took this device around London. First of all, I did 2 videos. So for the first part, I did it within the ULEZ area. So I did it within the central and inner London areas. I did some of the main roads. So I did the Finchley Road, which is recently, people will know, they dropped the speed limit down to 20 miles per hour, which is ridiculous on that road because it's dual carriageway with 3 lanes in each direction. And I didn't see anybody doing 20 miles per hour, I've got to be honest. And I did that road. I went into what they say is the busiest road in London, Oxford Street, Oxford Circus, Piccadilly Circus, quite a few other roads as well. I rode on the bus, I rode on the tube lines, right? And I thought, okay, well, let me see what this thing picks up. Now, the reality is people are like, oh, well, it's not an official device or whatever. Well, it actually is, because the company that makes them is a company that actually supplies monitoring equipment to hospitals, laboratories, and industry in 100 countries. And this is the sort of device that would be there to save people's lives. So it's there to let people know that the air is safe for them to work in and stuff like that. So this is not a toy from China. It's an actual device, but obviously it's portable, and it's usable. So it's designed for amateurs like me to be able to use it. So there are things that it doesn't do. It doesn't do CO2 and it doesn't do NOx, but it does particulate emissions, which I think are key. And it does an AQI, which is air quality index, which is the overall number of the quality of the air that you're breathing. And I think the particulate emissions, it does both 2.5 and PM10s. And I think these are quite significant. It also does, by the way, it does formaldehyde and it does TVOC, which is total volatile organic compounds. Right. Now, these 2 are interesting, but they're less significant in this scenario.
Yes.
There's something that you need to keep on indoors, actually, I found. But anyway, going back to the particulates, one of the key things that impacts health is actually particulate emissions. And in fact, I think on some websites I've seen that it's a little bit more significant than NOx. NOx also has a big effect on people, but NOx affects more the breathing. But particulate emissions, because the 2.5s can get into your lungs, they can get into your bloodstream, and they can lead to things like cancer and what have you. So they're actually even more significant. So I thought it was actually perfectly relevant to be checking particulate emissions. Because that's key to public health, and ultimately that's what this is supposed to be about, right? Public health.
Yeah.
So I took it into central London, and I was expecting some high numbers standing, and I stood in the middle of traffic islands. I stood next to park traffic. I knelt down low because they talk about how the pollutants will naturally go down.
Yeah.
I did all of that, and I really couldn't get the numbers to jump up. So there's a threshold on the AQI of 50. Anything below 50 is safe. Anything above 50 is moderate. And I got to be honest with you, I regularly see 50, 60, 70 at home. That's at home. So especially if there's some cooking going on and stuff like that.
Right. So inside the home.
Even at home, you get 50, 60. So it's not unusual. But outside, in a traffic situation, I never saw more than 30 on there.
Never more than 30.
Never more than 30. Standing in the middle of the busiest traffic islands, I couldn't get it over 30. And believe you me, I tried. People say, oh, he's trying to. It's a biased narrative, and he's trying to get the facts to fit that. And I'm like, I was trying to be fair. I was trying to do the journalistic thing. So I was standing in the busiest road I could find. I was standing behind taxis, standing behind buses, trying to get this thing to go up, and it just wouldn't.
And you can see you're not editing the, where you are to the camera looking at the thing. It's not like you've manipulated any of that.
No, I'm trying to be as live as I possibly can in a recording. So I'm saying, this is it. Here I am.
Yeah.
Here's the device, and see what it says.
So it begs the question: what device is Sadiq Khan using when he goes around? Presumably he has.
I don't think he's using any device.
No, that's my point,
he's not even
really.
using the facts that are coming out of the official air quality stations, because if you look at that,
yes.
And again, people like a lot of people on, not actually, many people have been very complimentary and very supportive and very kind.
Yes.
But every now and then you get some doubters, and they're like, oh well, the device is not real. The figure. Okay, it's not. It probably isn't 100% accurate. I never set out. People are like, oh, you're supposed to do multiple readings over multiple times in these conditions and this and that. I didn't go out to do a scientific experiment. I went out to just to do a general barometer of what's out there and to get an idea of what's happening. And I think that the extremes, and I'll come to that in a minute, the extremes that I realized are enough to demonstrate the point. I wasn't trying to get accurate readings. If you want accurate readings, you can just go online and look at the data from the air quality station.
Yes.
And if you do look at that data, you will find across London, it's mostly in the green. Sometimes it goes into the orange. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's also covering NOx, and it's covering CO2, and it's covering particulate emissions. So it's covering all of those things, and it works out an AQI. Here's the funny thing, because people say the device isn't accurate or whatever. So I went to I walked up to the official air quality station at Brent in IKEA, next to the North Circular, with my device. The live feed from the air quality station said 17 AQI, and my device said 15. So it was just a 2-point difference between that and that. And I'm standing right next to the North Circular Road.
And in theory, you'll be expecting it to be, if you were taking what Sadiq Khan was saying, you would imagine it's higher than 50 because of the concentration of vehicles.
Particularly in that second part, because I was covering the areas that were outside of ULEZ that we're going to come into. So the point I was trying to see there is like, is the air quality so bad that actually we do need ULEZ there? But again, same scenario. I could never get it above 30. I stood in the middle of Edgware Road near Hendon, that just comes off the North Circular Road, which is always a very busy road. Couldn't get it above 30. So and I think when 50 is the threshold, and like I said, 50, 60 at home is quite a norm. Then to me, that fundamentally says that the air is safe. Now, if you want me to get into it, where I did get very alarmed was when I rode on the underground.
I was just going to nudge us in that direction, because I was watching your video, and there you were on the underground, and then the device is giving these higher numbers in a place that we're all led to believe is the safest way of travelling, not by car but by the public transport, the underground being one. So do tell us what you saw there.
Well, this is it. I mean, I obviously knew that the numbers would be higher. I obviously did expect them to be higher, because when you think about the underground, again, if people watching this, internationally might be interested to learn, well, the London Underground has been there for about 160 years, and it's pretty much unchanged. There's a few new stations, a few new lines, but it's pretty much unchanged. And there's 160 years worth of dust, brake dust, metallic dust, human dust, animal dust, because there is wildlife down there. If you've ever watched the rats scurrying around underground, all kinds of things, asbestos, because they used to be used before.
Yes.
All of this stuff is down there, and it's getting circulated. It's, they try to clean it, but there was a news item a few weeks ago where they were showing a crew that was cleaning it, and they used metallic hoovers. So they actually use, magnetic hoovers. So they actually use magnetic hoovers to try and scoop up this metallic dust. So they recognize the fact that it's particulate, But as they were doing it, you could see more of it was still dispersing in the air than they were actually scooping up. So, it's almost a losing battle.
Yes, yes.
So I knew it was going to be bad, right? But I didn't realize just how bad. I went down there, I was on the Jubilee line, and the meter shot up to about 183. The particulate emission, 183. Remember, the threshold is 50.
50. And you were like, at Brent Cross, it was 30.
30, yeah.
Yeah, and in the underground, 189.
Yeah, 183.
183. Yes, let's not get the figures wrong.
No, 183, because you can see on the video.
Yeah.
But since then, another day, I actually went to the High Court the other day to go and see what was going on there. On the way back, I just turned my device on again. Actually, the reason I turned it on was I was at Westminster Station, and the Jubilee line at Westminster Station has those double doors. So it has the extra doors there, the barrier on the platform.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, okay, so this will be cleaner, right? So I turned the thing on, I kid you not, scared the life out of me, went up to 250.
Oh my goodness.
I posted a picture, went up to 250. And remember, this thing is calibrated from 0 to 500. So I think it has 6 categories. 250 is in the second highest category. Over 300, and that's a hazardous air emergency.
Wow.
As classified by the AQI index. So over 300, they need to shut everything down. So that's how close we are to 300. Went up to 250.
And millions of people are using the underground every single day. Breathing in all of this, and yet it's cars in the outside that are being blamed for.
Again, it's absolutely shocking. So just to continue with that for a second more. So the particulate emissions, and remember we've got PM10, PM2.5. The threshold for PM2.5 is 12. So below 12, literally 12. Below 12 is okay. Above 12, it starts to get moderate, and then the higher you get, the worse it gets.
Yes.
For PM10, it's 54. So when I got that 183 reading, I switched over to particulates. I had 119 on PM2.5. I had 219 on PM10. And remember, PM2.5 are the most dangerous ones, because that's the stuff that gets into your lungs and into your bloodstream. 119 on the underground. I mean, honestly, at that point, I was like, okay, I think from now on, I'm going to think carefully about if I need to do a tube journey. And I'm glad that I work from home now and I don't actually commute, So
the only safe way to use the underground is if you can hold your breath for the entire journey. Because as soon as you take one gulp of that air, you're and then if you take more than one gulp, which of course, a journey of say 20 minutes, that is, you're just filling your lungs with the stuff.
And again, for those people that have commented and said, oh yeah, but it's only short journeys on the underground, but you're out on the road. Well, no, the reality is you're not on the road that long. You go to a destination or you're inside a car or whatever. You're on the underground. Every journey is at least 45 minutes. I've never known a journey to be less than 45 minutes within London. You from point to point, you're doing 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half plus. So you are spending a fair bit of time down there.
And people are doing that daily.
Yeah, but also then when you think about the drivers, you think about the people that work down there. There's a couple of stops on the Jubilee line where there's actual shops. There's little, where you can buy chocolate and things like that. Yeah, they're actually on the platform, and I was looking across, and I felt sorry for those people. I'm like, wow, they're actually working in this environment.
Yeah,
it's terrifying. So ultimately, you think about the fact that if you are saying that there's a public air health emergency, we're trying to save lives, you could start by cleaning up the underground and maybe not put so much emphasis on cars, which actually aren't doing that much harm.
Yeah, that is incredible. Blimey. What a story. So I urge people to go and check out your video because it's just fascinating. Although people have now got the basics of it, it's just interesting to watch you going out and about. And looking.
Because also, don't forget, in part 2, I went to Heathrow Airport.
Yes.
And I went to other places as well. So I tried to. I was really trying to see what impact this has. But
we won't spoil it for people, so they can go and look at the Heathrow Airport and all of that, and find out what's going on there. That is fascinating. Thank you so much for coming and telling us about that. We will, if we can do another one at some point and talk about the pay per mile and the other things that might be coming in and the sort of things that really are behind all of this. But I think people will be astonished. And just before we go, of course, people are protesting about this. What's the situation at the moment? Because I know cameras are being cut mysteriously by figures in the night. Who would have thought? Disobeying the law. My goodness, how scary. Yeah. So and there's many protests, and there's lots of people are actually doing something. They're not just sort of going, oh dear, it's a bad thing. What can we do?
Yeah. I mean, there actually are so many protests going on right now that it's actually hard to keep up with them. The wonderful thing is that lots of people in individual areas have taken it upon themselves to do this. The best thing for people to do if they want to find out about them is that there's several Facebook groups, but there's two major Facebook groups. If you just search for Action Against ULEZ and join those groups, and then you'll find out what's going on, where the protests are, if there's one in your area. I think there's one in Uxbridge tomorrow, for example. I might go along to that one. And the other thing, of course, that's happening is obviously the judicial review, which happened on Monday and Tuesday last week. But we're probably not going to hear the verdict of that until towards the end of this month, which is a bit astonishing, really, because that only leaves a month to when it's actually being implemented, which, of course, is the 29th of August. So there's a lot of action going on. And even at that point, I say to people, look, even at that point, we don't win this and they still go ahead with it. There is an election next year. There's a mayoral election. And most of the major candidates that are standing against, I'm going to say the Labour candidate, because Sadiq Khan has said that he will stand again. But personally, I feel that he may be told not to because of his unpopularity. But let's just say the Labour candidate. And I think that most of the Conservative and people like Howard Cox that are standing against it, they've said that from day one, they're going to reverse the ULEZ expansion. So what I would say to just in a closing thought, for a lot of people who are very concerned about this, the first thing they think about is, oh, well, I need to change my car. I need to buy another car. If you change your car right now, you're not going to get the true value of that car. And if you buy another one, you're going to pay way, way over the odds for it, which is not the true market value. So ultimately, you're going to be losing a lot of money. And I would urge you not to do that, because almost the cost of that change would exceed the cost of you paying the ULEZ if you need it, if you don't use it every day, for example. So you need to do those maths. And I think that you might find, just keep the car that you've got. Do not consider selling it until at least a year afterwards.
Right. Brilliant. Good piece of advice. Wonderful. Shahzad, thank you so much for joining me. It's been brilliant. Do check out Brown Car Guy. The link's in the description, and we'll get you back and we'll talk about some of the other stuff. In the meantime, very short window now before it's either going to be, do you think, what's in your gut feeling? Is it going to be implemented on the 29th of August?
I'm still optimistic. But like I said, even if it is implemented, well, put it this way, I'm not selling my car.
No. Excellent. Good man. Brilliant stuff. Well, there we go. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that and find out as much as you can, of course. In the meantime, I'll be back with more interviews and monologues and what have you. But thank you from Shahzad and myself. Thank you for joining us. Till next time, goodbye.